With the Boston Marathon only days away and London and Manchester not far behind, I wanted to share my top last minute marathon tips to help you feel ready, run well, and most importantly, enjoy your race. Whether it's your first marathon or you're hoping for your fastest one yet, these are things that you can still implement right now to make a big difference. I've run 2:15 and taken 20 minutes off my marathon time in just over 3 years, while also coaching athletes to their own breakthroughs. So as you can imagine, I've got a lot of tips to give, so let's get straight into it. Tip number one, the taper is a balance. You want to reduce your training volume to help your legs feel fresh, but I find it's best to maintain your running routine, and you absolutely can't just stop running or completely remove the intensity in that final week. We're trying to get to race day both as fresh and as fit as possible, and that balance is going to be key here. 9 days before my marathon PB, I did this long run, which with warm up and warm down was a 22-mile day. Now I'm absolutely not suggesting that you watch this video and then go and run 22 miles, but you have to find the balance that works for you. I have shown this on the channel before, but this is my last 3 weeks of training before my marathon PB, which also includes the percentage of volume from my max week. And you can see that the training does reduce quite a lot, but it's more of a volume reduction than an intensity one. I always like to say that you don't want your body to think you're already on a break. I've made this mistake in the past. Your break comes after the marathon, and if you're spending that last week feeling like you're on a break, you're just going to really struggle to hurt and run well on marathon day. Also, as a side point here, you're probably going to feel terrible and question everything in at least one of the days in the last week. Just finished up the session, and as predicted, it was like marathon pace or slower, and it did not feel good. Felt pretty bad actually. And this is completely normal, and you're not just suddenly unfit. I've found that any session I go into expecting to be easy is just not easy, because even running like 3-minute reps at marathon pace, it's never just easy. Like, marathon pace is still a quick pace, and it's always going to feel a little bit tough, and it's important to just be ready for that. Just because a session on the Thursday before the race feels hard doesn't mean the race is going to feel hard. It's completely different. Tip number two is probably an obvious one, but one I see people forget all the time, and that's don't change anything in the last week. This applies to your diet, your kit, your easy run pace, anything that can be changed. Don't change it, except the thing I'm going to talk about in tip 3, but let's stick with this tip first. So if you have porridge for your breakfast every morning, pack porridge and have it before the race. If you're staying in an Airbnb, make your usual dinner in the Airbnb the night before the race, or at very least, go to a restaurant that serves something similar to what you would eat at home. Don't go to the expo and buy new shoes and new socks or even a new vest for the race. You have to wear what you've been training in. And please don't start running faster in your easy runs because you feel really fresh with the reduced volume. You have to just be disciplined and run at the same speed that you have been running at, and really just save it for race day. So tip 3 is related to sleep. You have to prioritise sleep in the final week before the marathon. That last night's sleep actually isn't as important as most people think it is, and I've heard countless stories of people who pretty much didn't sleep the night before the marathon and still ran like huge PBs. This is not a personal experience. I tend to sleep like a log because I put things in place to make sure that I get the best sleep possible, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. So marathons tend to start pretty early, or at very least you will have to wake up early to get your breakfast down you. So if every night you go to bed at 10 p.m. and wake up at 8 a.m, and then suddenly on marathon day you have to wake up at 5 or 6, you're probably losing out on a good few hours of sleep. So I try to really focus on switching up my sleeping pattern in the last week before the marathon, so that I'm waking up naturally at the time that I'm going to have to get up at on race day. In the week before Valencia, I was going to bed at 7 p.m, so that 1, I could naturally just wake up at 5 and it was fine, and 2, so that if it did take me like 3 hours to get to sleep, I was still getting a good solid 7 hours of sleep the night before the race. And yes, this night before the race sleep isn't vital necessarily, but it's just much better if you can get it in, because you're going to feel a bit better and you're going to have that peace of mind that comes with a good night's sleep. Tip number 4 is stay off your feet as much as possible. This is another one that I would hope would be quite obvious, but the week before the marathon is not the time to be using all your newfound free time to take up hill walking or to be doing a walking tour of the city that you're racing in. Unless it's for a shakeout run, there's absolutely nothing that could get me to leave my Airbnb in the day before the marathon. You've done the work in the 12 to 16 weeks before the marathon. Don't ruin it because you want to go and walk and see Big Ben. Like, you pretty much can't miss it in the race anyway, I can assure you. Also related to this tip is try to go to the expo as early as you can. There's a lot to see at marathon expos and they're a huge part of the experience, but you really want to try and avoid spending an hour or two walking around it the day before the race. Tip number 5 is plan your fueling strategy and don't deviate from it unless you absolutely have to. This applies not only to in the race, but also to carb loading in the day before the race. I personally aim for 10 grams of carbs per kilo of body weight in the day before the race. So that's 640 grams of carbs in the Saturday before a Sunday marathon. Of course, don't carb load if you haven't before. And if you haven't carb loaded in the past, I wouldn't recommend any more than an extra carb drink with dinner or an extra serving of pasta, things that you're used to and you know your stomach can handle, and just having a little bit more of them to give yourself that extra buffer and carb boost for race day. Another thing that I tend to follow is the low residue diet, which basically means that I don't eat any fruit, vegetables or whole grains. And this is supposed to just help keep everything in the stomach where it's supposed to be, if you know what I mean. Then when it comes to actual race day fueling, you have to be thinking about where you're going to carry your gels. Are you going to take gels from the course? Will you use drink mixes? How often will you fuel? The general advice is that you need 60 to 90 grams of carbs per hour in the marathon. And there really is no excuse for you not knowing how you're going to get that on board in the race. And it's really just one less thing to think or to stress about. Also, it's probably a good idea to have some Imodium on you just in case your stomach decides to take a bit of a funny turn. Tip number 6, which is very much related to the last tip, is that you have to be hydrating. I made the mistake of only using gels in my first marathon and it was bad. Actually, only in my most recent marathon did I finally start to realise how much fluid I actually needed to stop myself from getting cramp. If this is just grabbing water from the course, even if you don't feel that you need it, then that's fine. But personally, for me, and I think for most people, it's good to have some extra electrolytes, and I just don't think it's going to do any harm having a couple of electrolyte tablets in your pocket that you can just drop in a cup or a bottle on the course. And this is especially important if you have suffered with cramp in the past or if the weather forecast looks to be a bit warmer than you would like it to be. Tip number 7, which applies to both the week before the race and actually in the race, is to focus on what you can control and don't worry about anything else. You can control whether or not you wear a mask on the plane. You can control what time you go to bed in the last week, but you can't control things like whether you get a cold or whether you develop a bit of tightness. And although you can do the right things and try your best to avoid those things, if they happen, you need to just control how you deal with them mentally and whether or not you stay positive. In terms of race day, sometimes you just can't control things that are going to go wrong, whether that be the weather or cramp that you tried everything to avoid. But you can control how you deal with these things and what sort of mental framework you put in place to make sure that they don't completely knock you off track. I personally got really bad stomach issues from about 10 miles in the Valencia Marathon, which I had never had in training. And in my head, I was just like, well, we're not stopping, so... And it ended up being fine. It did mean that my whole fueling plan was out the window, and I was actually only able to take on 2 gels in the whole race. But because I didn't panic and because I had carb loaded the day before, controlling what I could control, the last 2k of that race was my fastest 2k, even though I'd only managed 40 grams of carbs in the 2 hours and 15-minute race, which is not recommended. So expect that things will go wrong. The marathon has a great way of bringing you back down to earth when you feel like you've got everything figured out. But if you focus on what you can control, both physically and mentally, you're going to be in a much better place to deal with it. On the subject of control, you can control the last few hours before the race, and I'm going to just call tip 8, prepare for race morning. Make sure you know exactly how you're getting to the start line and give yourself plenty of time. Make sure you know exactly what start pen you're in, and remember that it's probably unlikely that you'll be able to cut across the course in a big city marathon. So follow what the event map suggests for getting to your start pen. Also, if you can, try to get a little bit of a jog done. Although a marathon isn't run at a really fast pace, it's still good to get a little bit of a 5 to 10 minute max jog in beforehand. But don't stress if it's too busy, and if you can't get a jog in, either just try to keep moving or really build into that first mile in the actual race. Finally, on race morning is take toilet paper and an extra layer that you're happy to just ditch. There's going to be a lot of people using a lot of portaloos, and there may not be any toilet roll left when you get there. And also, if you get to the start early enough, like you should be, you're probably going to be standing there for quite a while, so it's good to just have a long sleeve or a jacket and not be standing there cold and suffering for like an hour. So yeah, both of those things will help a lot. Just make sure you've got them. Tip number 9 comes in 2 parts, and I've told the second part to so many people recently who seem to think this is the greatest tip in history, and it's actually the reason that I had to make this video. But part 1 is hopefully a fairly obvious one, and that's have a pace strategy, and ideally one that isn't some variation of banking time in the first half, because running even splits or running quicker in the second half is always just going to be more enjoyable and give you the best chance of getting the best performance out of yourself. Even if you aren't going out and targeting a time and you're just trying to get round and finish, I think it's still really important to have some kind of speed limit in that first half, a pace that you know is too quick and that you can't maintain, and that you have to run slower than that, because again, this is just going to help you not be suffering in the last however many miles. So how do you keep an eye on your pace? Surely with modern GPS, you just put on your auto lap and you let it beat. No, that's not what we're going to do here. I have run 4 marathons, and every single one, my GPS is measured at least 300 meters long, which even if you're running 2 hours and 20 minutes for your marathon, it's still going to have you running over a minute slower than your GPS watch would suggest. So you absolutely have to just go on the course markings. My advice on this is to set up your watch so that you can only see the lap time, and then you have to turn off the auto lap feature and look at your watch every mile. But then we're going to split it at every 5 mile mark. So for example, if you're trying to run sub 3 hours for the marathon, that's 6:51 per mile. So you're going to look at your watch at every mile mark on the course, and you know that you're targeting 6:51, 13:42, 20:33, 27:24, and 34:15 for each mile split. So once you get to 5 miles and you hopefully see something around 34:15, you split your watch as if you were doing a rep, and you repeat that process. This kills 2 birds with 1 stone, where you're not using dodgy GPS to guide your pace, and you also don't have to memorise 26 splits, you only have to memorise 5. This of course also works for K markers, but London, Manchester and Boston all use mile marks. However, if you're running a marathon in mainland Europe, say France or Spain, it's likely that it'll be K markers, so plan for that. Tip number 10 is just enjoy it. I've ran the London Marathon twice, and both times fallen quite short of my goal. However, they've still been 2 of the best days of my life, and ones that I'll definitely remember forever. There's nothing quite like the marathon, so enjoy the celebration and remember that nobody cheers for you in real life. That's all I've got, so hopefully at least one of those tips was helpful, and if you have any other tips that I may have missed or may help some other people, please leave them in the comments. I'm going to be in London next weekend supporting Holly in her second marathon, so if you see either of us out there, especially Holly, give us a shout, and good luck to everyone who has marathons coming up. Cheers!